good news is that while no one should be afraid of debate, and this debate is a nice thing here, the MAGA movement is actually quite unified. Believe it or not, all the talk to the contrary when it comes to these issues. An overwhelming majority of self-identified MAGA Republicans support close U.S.-Israel relations. According to a CBS News poll, moreover, after the recent Operation Midnight Hammer B-2 bombers in Iran, 94% of self-identified MAGA Republicans supported President Trump's dropping those B-2 bombs on Fort Natanz and the other Iranian facilities there. This is a wildly popular policy there. What did Dave Smith say about this? He re-upped his now years-long crusade to call for Donald Trump's impeachment. Y'all probably don't know that about Dave Smith, do you? He's now called for Donald Trump to be impeached multiple times. But Dave, look, I mean, I don't like when people misquote me either. You probably don't like when people misquote you. So I actually have a little bit of a highlight reel here of Dave Smith's tweets over the years. Dave Smith, March 19th, 2024. Donald Trump is responsible for around 500,000 deaths in Yemen, and between the weapons to Ukraine and the Abraham Accords Jerusalem embassy, he is at least partially responsible for the two worst humanitarian crises in the world. He's a war criminal who should spend his life in prison. He is calling Donald Trump a war criminal who should spend his life in prison. You should be livid at that. I am livid at that as a Trump supporter. Donald Trump, Dave Smith, June 16, 2025. Trump allegedly had full prior knowledge of Israel's attacks and gave it his blessing while pretending to be negotiating with the Iranians as a cover. If this is true, Trump is the most impotent bitch of a leader imaginable. He's calling our president, the greatest president in my lifetime, an impotent bitch. Are you kidding me?
Welcome to another episode of the Soothing Semantics podcast. I'm your host, Rafie Pinsky. Make sure to subscribe, smash the like button, leave your comments. For all of your South Florida real estate needs, follow me, Rafie the Realtor. Would love to assist you. And today we have Josh Hammer, who's the senior editor at large at Newsweek. He's conducted many debates. He recently conducted a debate with Dave Smith on Turning Point USA. Is a very, very interesting debate. Wanted to obviously review that with you. Before, we're going to push that off for a little bit. And I just want to ask you a little bit more about yourself, how you got into the world of media, being such a staunch American Jewish Zionist. Definitely something that a lot of people have a problem with nowadays, both in and out of America. We're getting smoke from the left. We're getting smoke from the right. It takes balls to do it. So
yeah, I appreciate it. I guess. I mean, someone has to be crazy enough to do it. Look, I mean, I think what you're basically asking, Rafie, is how I kind of fell into more or less what I do for a living, which is kind of writing, podcasting, speaking, all writing books, all that fun stuff. I mean, it didn't happen overnight. One thing kind of small, incremental leads to another. That's kind of the nature of how these things work. I'm a lawyer by background, so it was during the time between college and law school. I was working in Washington, D.C. That's kind of where I got political fever a little bit. And around the time that I started in law school, I became more politically active. I started blogging a little bit for a couple of conservative websites here and there. Got involved with Ted Cruz's 2016 presidential campaign back when I was in law school. One thing learns to another. I was introduced to Ben Shapiro. This is probably about a decade ago or so, and writing for the Daily Wire at their kind of towards the beginning of the Daily Wire's existence was definitely one of the things that kind of started to gain me not a following, but at least something kind of sort of close, I guess, to a niche following. Long story short, after working at the law firm that I did in Texas for a year and a half, I then went to go clerk for a federal court of appeals judge, Judge James C. Ho, an amazing judge, hopefully our next Supreme Court justice. And I basically used that year to kind of be my transition year to pivot from what I essentially was prior to that, which was a lawyer with a media side presence, to trying to be a writer or talker or media person with a legal side presence. And that's kind of more or less still what I'm doing today. So I write a syndicated column through Creator Syndicate. I'm the senior editor at large for Newsweek, which is where my show, the Josh Hammer Show, is based. And then, as you aptly point out, I do any of these other debates and conferences and college, law school talks, whatnot there. My first book came out in March. So it's been really fun, and hopefully the journey will keep on rolling for some time now.
Okay. That's quite a lot. That's quite a lot of stuff. You're an accomplished guy. You mentioned I couldn't help but notice when you mentioned what's it called? I'm losing Ben Shapiro's
Daily Wire.
Daily Wire. You started out working with them early on when they were in the earlier years.
Well, look, I mean, start out as a so I joined the Daily Wire full time in January 2019. I think the first article I published with them was December 2016. So that would have been just a few months after I started working at the law firm I was working at, Kirkland Ellis down in Houston, Texas. So that would have been towards the beginning of the Daily Wire. I think the Daily Wire launched in 2015, if I'm not mistaken, 2015, 2016, right around that time. So yeah, I mean, those first few articles I wrote would have been around the time they started, but I didn't join full time until January 2019. I only actually worked there full time for a little over a year. I've actually been at Newsweek now for, oh gosh, over 5 years, which is really quite crazy, to be honest with you.
Okay, well, that's still relatively early. It's at least halfway through, right? We're in 2025. We're inching toward 2026. So the Daily Wire has been around then for 10 years approximately,
Yes, I again,
more or less.
I only worked there full time for a little over a year, so I
All
don't
right.
know all the full company details. Ben is still a friend; we're still in close touch. But
Gotcha.
yeah, I think Daily Wire launched in 2015 or 16. I think probably technically launched in 15, but probably didn't really kind of blow up until 2016 because 2016 is also when Ben Shapiro left Breitbart during the kind of heat of the Donald Trump Ted Cruz primary, if memory serves.
Gotcha. Because I was watching Candace Owens just had Nick Fuentes on.
I
They
saw that.
just had a conversation. You watched it?
I didn't watch it, but I saw a clip or two of it. It's kind of
Yeah.
hard not to laugh at these sorts of things.
Yeah. So I sat and I listened to the entire thing, and it was very interesting, but there wasn't much intellect involved. It was pretty much Candace getting triggered at things Nick was saying and upset with him, trying to call him out on things that he said against her that was derogatory. The reason I bring this up is because he almost seems it almost seems like all of this anti-Jewish, anti-Israel sentiment from Nick, Candace aside, comes from his apparent closeness with the people at the Daily Wire in the earlier years. When he's 26 now, when he was 18, this is what he was telling Candace. When he was 18, he buddied up with a lot of the people at Daily Wire. They wanted him to be a writer and really be a part of the Daily Wire. And then he had some questions about Israel, and one of the I forget her name, one of the women who was at the Daily Wire kind of didn't really want to speak to him about it, and then he quote unquote was digging deeper, and then he just became this hardcore anti-Israel, anti-Jewish guy, and then just went down that rabbit hole.
Yeah, that is a massive load of bullshit. There is zero truth to that.
Mhm.
I was more or less there. I mean, I remember the 2000. It was a 2016 election cycle when I first learned about Nick Fuentes. It was the 2016 election cycle when Nick Fuentes first blocked me. So that
Yeah.
he was already way down the neo-Nazi rabbit hole as early on as 2015 and 2016, right around the time the Daily Wire started. There is I don't think there is a smidgen of truth to the narrative that you just told me. This sounds like a lot of self-serving bullshit, frankly, from a
Right.
professional bullshitter, Nick Fuentes. So I would not believe that as far as the eye can see, so to speak.
I find it's hilarious to me that his last name is Fuentes. Every time I see him as white nationalist, it's like, dude, you are so confused. You obviously had to look it up because I said obviously his father has some Latin heritage, unless they just changed the name for the fun of it.
Right.
His father is a partly Mexican, half Mexican. It's very interesting to me. But
Wow.
anyway, point wasn't to focus on Nick. Uh, you know, now you had this debate, and this is really interesting stuff. Dave Smith, for whoever doesn't know, I imagine many of you watching who watch my episodes normally do know who Dave Smith. He is a Jewish comedian. I don't really watch any of his comedy, but he's a comedian.
You shouldn't. His comedy sucks.
Check it out. Check it out. And listen, if I think it's funny, I'll check it out. But I haven't really. I don't see any of his snippets online. It's probably not that good, but
There's a
I'll check it
reason
out.
for that.
I imagine so. So Dave has become this rabid anti-Israel debater, a master debater. Not when I say that jokingly, but has conducted many debates. He debated Douglas Murray. He's debated a multitude of different pro-Israel voices on Piers Morgan. And a lot of the anti-Israel crowd considers him to be one of the better debaters. And so Charlie Kirk had Josh on recently, as I mentioned. And the debate was very interesting. I think Josh did very well. I think you had some awesome points. I wanted to ask you first, like, what did you think of it? What was your experience?
Yeah. So first of all, look, thank you. This is not my first time debating Dave. So Dave and I debated back in February. That was a smaller profile debate. It was at Princeton University in New Jersey. It was organized by a group called Steamboat Institute, which is a conservative think tank based out of Steamboat Springs, Colorado. They do this tour called, I believe, the Campus Liberty Tour. So that was their first event of the spring semester, I think was the exact kind of time frame. So we did this back then, slightly different format, different moderator. Long story short, I went into that debate, as someone who is decently educated and decently knowledgeable about these topics. I went in kind of confident in, the facts, the history, the law, and all that there. And I left a little more jaded about just how far facts and history and law and logic and rationale can take you in these sorts of settings. Just to kind of give you one example, at that debate in February, Dave starts accusing Israel of committing genocide in Gaza, and I'm a lawyer. I know a thing or two about the international definition of genocide, so I start talking about the Geneva Conventions and Article this and 1951. What's the definition of genocide? And I start quoting, the civilian to combatant death ratio and urban warfare and all these things. And I kind of say all that, and then Dave looks back at me and goes, "Oh, but look at all the rubble." And like the audience, people start like applauding. So like, you mentioned Ben Shapiro earlier, or I guess I did, and then you mentioned him after me. So look, one of the lines that made Ben famous 10 years ago was kind of like his bumper sticker slogan, his tagline was this notion that facts don't care about your feelings. The problem is that I'm not sure that's true anymore, frankly. It very well might have been true. In fact, it quite possibly, maybe even probably was true when Ben said it, but I'm just not sure that really captures the day and age that we're in. So with that aside, and with that experience in February aside,
such an astute point, Josh. It's so true.
Yeah, well, it's really important, right? Because with that experience in February under my belt, I kind of went to this with a slightly different game plan, which was to basically pull no punches and to try to knock this son of a bitch, across the jaw. I mean, that was basically my game plan there, and especially in a venue like Turning Point USA, which, to Charlie's tremendous credit, and Charlie moderated a great debate, by the way. Charlie's a friend. We talk offline quite often. So, to Charlie's great credit, Turning Point has become a MAGA grassroots army. I mean, this is like President Trump's like grassroots activist organization. I think Turning Point is just as, if not more, responsible than any other organization, frankly, for Trump's victory last November. If you look at the Gen Z vote, it's really incredible stuff. So I thought that this was the venue with Charlie Kirk, no less, as the moderator, to just try to kind of hammer home this point over and over and over and over again, including in my opening remarks when I kind of pulled out Dave Smith's tweets and read them. That whatever Dave Smith might say and whatever folks like Tucker Carlson might say about their own conception of foreign policy, their own conception of U.S.-Israel relations, everyone, you're all entitled to your thoughts. But whatever their thoughts might be on these topics, that is not reflective of this movement, this post-2015 Trumpian MAGA America First movement, insofar as the president himself understands it and executes it. And I thought that was a very important point to drive home to a very impressionable, young, pro-MAGA, pro-Trump audience. So, look, the debate was lively. There obviously are a couple things I would have liked to have done differently in retrospect. As you can imagine, it's not always easy to kind of do exactly what you would game plan out there in kind of the heat of the moment. That's kind of not the nature of how a live debate works. But I'm overall pretty happy with how it went. I got certainly overwhelmingly positive feedback. And I think that I accomplished number one aim that I set out to do, which was to drive this delta and separate the Smith-Carlson position from the MAGA position itself.
Okay, well, how do you feel? So a couple of thoughts on that. How do you feel the crowd responded to your points? You feel like it was overwhelming? Because Dave just did on his channel. I didn't finish it. I was watching it before you and I sat down. He feels that double the amount of the audience was in support of him. That's what he claims.
We both got our cheers.
Right.
Look, Dave Smith is a libertarian. Okay, we know one thing about libertarians: they are a statistical anomaly, but they are very loud and they are very passionate. There's a reason why at the conservative conference CPAC for many years, Ron Paul, who was Dave Smith's intellectual hero, would always win this straw poll of presidential picks because the libertarians just are like very passionate, even though they're a statistical kind of minority. So that's kind of, I think, similar dynamic to what happened here. Dave Smith definitely has his mega fans, and they were cheering really loud whenever he was making any points there. I'm not convinced that he had a majority of the room on his side. On the contrary, Turning Point USA did a 2,000 person sample size straw poll where they asked a series of questions. Charlie tweeted out on social media just this past Friday, I think it was. And if you look at the results of that poll, 73% of the Turning Point USA attendees describe themselves as pro-Israel, which again, there's work left to do. That number easily could, I would argue, should be 90+%, but 73% is still a very healthy majority. And 86% of them said they supported President Trump's strikes on Iran last month, which I support, and Dave Smith was against. That's 86%. So no, I don't think that Dave Smith had a majority of the crowd on his side. I think that he had some people that were really passionate on his side. And because he's a quote unquote comedian, he likes to he's pretty good at presenting himself there. He likes to end with a lot of exclamation points, a little pizzazz and emphasis there. So all of the above, I think he got some loud applause. I definitely got some loud applause too. I think it's worth noting, by the way, that Dave Smith also got booed at least twice. Once my opening remarks, once when he made an absolutely smack in the face, stupid statement about how you can't be pro-life and when it comes and support Israel and Gaza. The crowd booed their lungs out at him at that one, and rightfully so, because it was a disgusting thing to say. I didn't get booed a single time. So I think it's a much more nuanced story, unsurprisingly, than what Dave Smith is telling his propagandistic fans on his YouTube channel. But that's just the way it is.
I totally hear you. First of all, what is with his accent? He has this. Do you know what he has? Almost this California basic bitch. You know the girls the Starbucks girls in the Valley in Cal.
Yeah.
He always has this.
He's from New Jersey.
Random.
He lives in New Jersey. I don't know if he's from California, but he lives in New Jersey.
When he speaks, sometimes he stretches out his words. Do you ever notice how he goes like that? I don't know if you ever realized.
I have not noticed that, but I mean, look, he's a pretty stupid person with a stupid face who talks stupidly. That's my general read on Dave Smith.
Yeah, I mean, the dude is to some degree good at what he does, man. Like, and I'm clearly not in support. Yeah. I'm on your team, man. You know that, but the guy, I got to give him credit where credit is due. So he's not the easy. There's a lot of people on our end, on our side, who are not ready to do it. Listen, I'm not going to sit here and say, I'm a young buck. I'm 31. I don't have a huge channel. I don't have incredibly big, large accolades. I got my college degree, my army experience. I have, pretty interesting life. I do hope to debate him at some point. I do feel very prepared to do it. What I just also wanted to ask you is, or before I ask the question, I saw you mentioned who Ami Kozak was?
Yeah, in fact, funny timing, after you and I chat here, I'm going to have Ami Kozak on my show in the next 20, 30 minutes, actually.
Oh, okay. There you go. Okay. Yeah. So he debated Dave on Candace Owens' show a while back. It must have been a year ago, maybe a little bit more than that. They might have been on more than once, but I know they were on once.
The first time I think was probably over a year and a half ago. It was probably just after October 7th, honestly.
Yes. So you saw it too. So I believe, I'm quite confident that they were talking about hostages, and I think it was on Candace Owens' show with Ami, and Dave was really passionate about the idea that if someone kidnapped one of his children, he would do terrible things. He would be capable of terrible violence. Or this isn't verbatim, but along these lines, against whoever took his kid. But I know reality is he wouldn't. Highly doubtful he personally would have the ability to do so, but he would definitely be very supportive of whoever would be doing those things. Right. The U.S. government, the Israeli government, what have you. But yet when it comes to Israel having to rescue over 200 captives, he can't understand, he can't wrap through his brain as an American Jewish guy, that there has to be a level of ruthlessness, there has to be a level of aggression on Israel's side. This is just the fact of the matter. Israel has to wage this war and it has to win. And I think, I was asking ChatGPT about this, about the need for Jewish strength and the perception of how our enemies see us. And I just think to a large degree in his psyche, Dave has a very big issue with Jews being perceived as strong because he's afraid of the repercussions of that.
Yeah, look, I'm not a psychiatrist, but there's probably also something to be said for the fact that he's probably scared of his own Jewishness, right? I mean,
Right.
this debate happened on the 17th of Tammuz, the fast day. I mean, he tried to play this card at the beginning where he said, "Oh, I didn't sleep all night. I took this flight at 6 a.m. So if I sound tired, then Josh didn't win fairly." And I was like, "Dude, it's a fast day. I'm not even drinking water." And he looked at me like,
Right.
what?" Look, he didn't know it was a fast day. This is the kind of guy who's probably eating cheeseburgers on Yom Kippur, if I had to guess. Married a
Right.
chick, so like the whole 9 yards, right? He's definitely. I don't know what happened in his youth. I don't know what his experiences were to Jewish life or lack thereof. But this is someone I think who is probably has some sort of kind of psychological scar when it comes to strong Jewish identity in general. Jewish actual strength, qua strength. Best evidenced or best illustrated or encapsulated really by the IDF. He definitely has a deep discomfort with this. I think it's, if I had to guess, I think it's probably coming from a deeply personal place for him. And then on the other hand, he's also a libertarian dogmatist. He's an ideologue. This is the trouble with debating dogmatists and ideologues is you can whip out any amount of facts or logic or data points or this or that there. But if you're coming from a place that is not empiricism, that's not driven by data, but it's coming from just pure ideology there, it's very difficult to reason with that. And like Ron Paul before him, he is coming from an ideological starting point where America cannot and should not get involved anywhere in the world, pretty much period, full stop, end of story. And any of America's allies or so-called allies that themselves get into wars, that ipso facto necessarily makes that ally or would-be ally not a great ally because it has the potential to drag America into a war. That's basically the singular prism through which he views global affairs. It's not really a whole lot more complicated than that. So this is crazy stuff, honestly. This is how you get these folks, whether it's libertarians like Smith or the isolationists like Carlson, making the so-called America First case for appeasing Iran and Russia and China. It's totally loonbag internet comment section stuff, but it's coming from a place of ideology and not empiricism. So you combine that with what I suspect is a strong kind of personal psychological element going on here, and that's how you get to Dave Smith.
Uh-huh. Okay. Well, two things. First off, I don't know if it's just Dave. I think there's a lot of Jews, unfortunately, in what we would say called the
That's true.
diaspora that the Norman Finkelsteins. There's a Rabbi Yaakov Shapiro, or maybe you've heard of the guy, also very staunchly quote unquote anti-Zionist. He's been on TRT. You can easily find him just by putting in his name. Very anti-Israel guy. There's a bunch like him, Notori Karta, etc. It's an appeasement mentality, scared, etc. When it comes to America First, right? You were mentioning all these Carlson, Dave Smith like people are pushing this idea of pushing Israel off of any kind of financial quote unquote aid or assistance,
Right.
giving them any sort of money. And making America first. Israel's dragging us into wars, and Netanyahu's forced us to attack Iraq, et cetera, et cetera. What I just think on a very basic level, America wouldn't have Israel as a close ally if it didn't benefit the United States strategically. Second, we are an arm. We are essentially their proxy, I believe. It's a funny way to put it, but we are benefiting them tremendously with technology. When these are just truths, whether we like it or not. I believe when we're fighting wars and doing a very good job, mind you, this allows for the American industrial complex to see whether things work or not, whether different weapons work or not, whether military strategies work or not. You can call it dark, you can call it negative, but I love how all of these woke conservatives try to act as like America doesn't benefit from this. The people who benefit from it surely benefit from it. And at the end of the day, America wants a powerful arm in the Middle East to do what they need to do, whether that be to keep power, money, resources, and This is what I think.
Yeah, look, there are a lot of benefits of the specific U.S.-Israel current aid relationship. I do ultimately think that the negatives outweigh the positives, which is why I've been a proponent for a very long time of ultimately winding down this relationship. But you're totally
I
right that
agree.
America has benefited in many ways when it comes to looking at things like Iron Dome, Arrow 3. I mean, all these various forms of missile defense have oftentimes been joint U.S. Israel developmental projects. There's really no reason why the U.S. and Israel can't try to jointly develop military projects, small arms, everything from tanks to rifles to everything. There's no reason why any of that has to stop if an annual aid deal actually stops. But you're totally right. Look, I did get one comment on it was LinkedIn or Instagram on some social media platform. Someone was like, "How could you let Dave Smith get away with this line that it's quote unquote welfare for the U.S. to Israel, given that the U.S. benefits so much?" And to be totally honest with you, I actually don't even remember Dave Smith saying that. The funny thing about these debates is it's kind of like this stuff is flying so quickly there that like you really, and especially, I was jumping in quite a bit, right? I mean, Dave got really pissed off at me, frankly, for interrupting him so
Mhm.
much. And that was kind of part of my deliberate strategy, actually, was to try and rattle him a little bit. I'm not sure how much it
Right.
worked, but that was part of the calculated strategy. So, it's the guy is such a bullshit artist that like you actually can't just hop in and interrupt every single time he says something wrong because I would literally not let him finish a sentence, right? I know really. I mean, like that's kind of like the nature of the beast there. And I didn't respond to this person on LinkedIn who said, "Why? How'd you let him get away with it?" I think, but in case you're watching, there's your answer. It's like you literally just like can't jump in every single time there. But you're totally right. This is not quote unquote welfare. It's worth noting, by the way, that the aid package now, whether you like it or you don't, and again, from a principled position, I happen to not like, and I want to ultimately be phased out, frankly, as soon as possible. But one thing that is worth noting is that this current aid package it really is only dealing with military matters. Israel, back in its infancy, used to get not just annual military aid from the U.S., but also just straight up economic aid. That's when Israel was a much poorer society before the Netanyahu-led free market revolution in the 1990s and kind of the rise of Israel as this kind of venture capital tech hub, the startup nation, as the famous slogan goes. This is so back in the day before that, back when it was a more agrarian kibbutz, and in some ways kind of a straight up socialist society. But
Socialism.
that's back when they had more straight up economic aid. That economic aid ended a very long time ago. So we're talking here now only about military aid. Again, even on the military aid, I do think that the negatives outweigh the positives, but the U.S. has definitely benefited in many ways as well.
For sure. I mean, it's just Israel has the ability to produce almost all, if not all, of what they purchase from the United States. I believe they even have the ability to build these jets. I really think. Listen, I really don't doubt our people, and when it push comes to shove, I mean, technology. When it comes to military technology, bar none. If we are if we need to develop and manufacture our own weapons, we can do it. For sure, we can develop our own ammo, all of these other things, and we can manufacture it for a lot less, and we don't have to rely on the United States for key decisions. This is a bad thing. Relying on the U.S. for the 3 billion a year is not a good thing. And I totally agree with you that we can't just suddenly do it now, but we have to wean ourselves off of it because there have been too many times, way too many times prior to October 7th, the protective edge, many other many other conflicts or wars where we had our enemy on their knees and we didn't finish the job because the United States was telling us to do otherwise. And and even though it's scary, and I think a lot of Israelis are afraid of the idea of foregoing the aid and not having America as our ally, it doesn't mean they wouldn't be our ally. If
Yeah.
that is the reason, if they say, well, no, we must give you this money or else we won't have your back, then you know that they aren't really a friend of ours to begin with. Then
Yeah.
it was all it was all an ulterior motive altogether.
Are you Israeli, Rafi? You served in Zahal?
Yeah, yeah,
Okay.
yes.
Yeah. Okay.
I grew up in New York, but most of my family lives there. I
Okay.
served in the army. Yeah.
Okay, so yeah, because you were saying we kind of speaking of Israel, so I was just kind of curious and clarifying it. Look, I mean, I mean, as an American, right? I mean, I'm not a big fan of foreign aid in general, to be honest with you. I don't really support foreign aid for unless there's a truly, utterly compelling reason to essentially any country. I mean, like there will be exceptions. Like money is a tool of statecraft. If you want to kind of get back to like great power competition with the U.S. and the Soviets in the Cold War, maybe U.S. China now. I mean, there are exceptions to the rule, but as a general rule, most foreign aid, especially to second and third world countries, ends up just being gobbled up by power-hungry kleptocrats and dictators there. It very rarely gets to its intended recipient. It's generally just not a great thing. And frankly, as someone who pays very close attention to rising anti-Israel sentiment and on the real fringes, outright rising anti-Semitism, including, very much, I'm sad to report, on certain pockets of the right. The fact that Israel is the largest aid recipient, this is something that they love to talk about a lot there. So, I'm not saying that you try to appease these despicable people, but if you can take out one of their leading arguments, it's not necessarily the end of the world. And to your point, from Israel's perspective, and I think I said this on the debate stage, I'm an American. I'm obviously also a staunch Zionist. If you believe in the beauty of Zionism, I think Zionism in kind of its pure form, the notion that the Jews control their own destiny and self-determination in the Jewish people's ancestral and biblical homeland, it's very difficult to reconcile that to having a large-scale dependency on any foreign power, even a benevolent foreign power such as the United States there. So I think the authentic kind of true Zionist position, so to speak, in addition to, let's call it the true America First position, I think they actually kind of align in this particular case.
Couldn't agree more. Fantastic. I wanted to just ask you, I know we agreed to 30 minutes. Of course, if you want to go longer, no, but no problem. But I imagine you have your Omni episode. Are there any finishing thoughts that you have? Any things you wanted to just throw in there that maybe we didn't cover?
No, it's a great conversation. Really nice to meet you, Rafie. Look, I hope that your audience enjoyed the debate. If not, they can go ahead and check it out. It's on Charlie Kirk's
I thought you were going to
YouTube
say
page.
something else.
Oh no.
If they didn't join the debate, they can go ahead and go fuck themselves. That's it. I
No,
was
it's
hoping
not,
you were
not
going to say
no.
that.
But go ahead and watch the debates. Make up your own mind. I'm based on you and me. I have a feeling as to which way this audience will shift. But no, it's been a great conversation. And shameless plug. Make sure to check out my book if you haven't done so already. It's called Israel and Civilization: The Fate of the Jewish Nation, the Destiny of the West. It came out in March. Touches on a lot of the themes that Dave Smith and I were debating on that debate stage. So I think it'll be of great interest to this audience.
Fantastic. Guys, check out the book. I'm assuming it's where all books are
You
sold,
bet.
Amazon, wherever else.
Amazon, Barnes and
Kindle.
Noble, wherever our books are sold for sure. Yep.
Awesome. Okay. Ladies and gents, I hope you enjoyed this episode. Of course, subscribe, like, share, leave your comments. Real Estate Needs South Florida, Rafie the Realtor on Instagram. Josh, thank you so much for joining me, man. I hope we can meet in person in the near future. Dude, we live in the same state, so I mean we can coordinate something, but really thank you so much for taking the time. Thank you for doing what you're doing. And I'll see you soon.
You bet. Great to meet you, Ralphie.
See ya.